All right, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I'm Mary Jones. I serve as chair of the Marriage and Family Therapy Advisory Committee of the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Today is Friday, June 5th, 2026. I'll ask members of the advisory committee to respond to a roll call to signify their presence at this open meeting that's being conducted remotely by conference call and other electronic medium. Jim Kilmartin.
Good morning.
Nicole Eitzen.
Present.
Betsy Henderson.
Present.
Stacy Hodges.
Present.
Renisha Hunter.
I don't think I see her. No.
Yeah, Marcy Lechtenberg.
Present.
Diane Siebel.
Present.
And Heidi Vella.
Present.
Okay. And I note the following BSRB members are also present. David Fye.
I am present, and Leslie is available if she's needed to log in, but I don't think there's any items that concern regulation, so I'll have her do other tasks, but she's on call if we need her.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. Next, we'll have David Fye read a message about this meeting being held remotely.
All right. Thank you, Mary. And Renisha Hunter was able to log in, so she's present now as well.
Okay, welcome.
This is David Fye, Executive Director for the Kansas Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board. Public comment allows the public to address the advisory committee about any concerns, but the Kansas Open Meeting Act, or KOMA, does not require the advisory committee to provide public comment or answer questions from individuals. Individuals requesting to provide public comment could contact the Executive Director prior to the meeting by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov. No time has been reserved for public comment, as no individuals requested time for public comment. Because we are conducting this public meeting remotely by conference call and other teleconference ability, I state for the record the following information. Public access to this meeting is being conducted by medium of interactive communication, allowing members of the public without cost to attend the meeting through the use of the conference call or by viewing the board's YouTube channel. While the meeting is conducted remotely, the requirements of the KOMA are not suspended. Therefore, we will be conducting this meeting pursuant to the KOMA. On May 14th, 2026, we sent notice of the advisory committee meeting to all individuals who had requested notice of such meetings. The notice was also posted on the board's website, ksbsrb.ks.gov. You may obtain a copy of the notice at that website. An agenda and other media material have been posted on the board's website and are available for review. You may also request a copy of the agenda specifically by sending an email to david.fye@ks.gov with a subject line request for the agenda, and it will be sent to you. The notice contains information for the conference call and YouTube channel, allowing members of the public to attend the meeting free of charge. The notice also states that if we have any technical issues during the meeting, you may call the board office at 785-296-3240 or send an email to bsrb@ks.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available on the BSRB YouTube channel following the conclusion of the meeting by using the link to the meeting on the agenda. The conference call line is active. I did check it before we got started. There's no one currently on the line, but if I hear someone connect and introduce themselves, I will let you know.
Okay, thanks so much, David. The next item on the agenda is an agenda approval, just sort of a point of just letting you all know, I'm sorry the materials came out a little bit late. That was my doing, not Dave's, because I'd been out of the office. And so we were a little bit late getting materials to you. I just wanted to apologize because I know it didn't give you a lot of advance time for reading that. So if you need a few more minutes to look at the agenda and see if there's any items we need to add or change, I'll let you have that time. And if not, we'll take a motion to approve the agenda as written.
The only thing I saw in there was a possible discussion of moving to quarterly meetings, and I thought we were already in quarterly meetings. So did I?
Yeah, we technically, that's a great point. We can discuss that. We are technically doing every other month. And so we've had some rescheduling conflicts, but we're not on quarterly. We aren't.
Okay, every other month.
Mm-hmm.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Great, thank you. Next item is the approval of the minutes from the meeting on February 13th. And again, knowing we got these out a little bit later, just want to make sure you have ample time to review those. And when someone's ready, if there's not any changes or corrections, I'll take a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Heidi. Is our second?
I second.
Thanks, Marcy. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Okay, thanks so much. Dave, we'll move it back to you for the executive director's report.
All right, thank you, Mary. We'll start with some operations updates for the BSRB. I do want to let you all know we are getting an influx of applications, and a lot of new individuals are getting licensed right now. We have a lot of graduations, and when that happens, a lot of people tend to submit materials. Some of the professions allow individuals to submit prior to their actual graduation. They can get registered for the examination and some of the professions and start to walk through those steps. But really excited to see all of the different envelopes going out for people when they get their certificates. And so congratulations to all the graduates and also to all the people that are getting licensed and those that will be licensed over the next few months. So but my staff have let me know those numbers are going to be big when we look back on the month of June, but really happy to see all those people become licensed. In terms of our licensing processes, we are about halfway through a 2-year onboarding process to move our licensing system to the state's new enterprise licensing system through a company called Acela. We had a meeting 2 days ago with some representatives from the Office of Information Technology Services just to go over our statement of work. They've reviewed all of our processes, all of our forms. They are having the vendor build a system for us that will integrate things more seamlessly. And so we're still about a year away from fully being moved over to that system, but hopefully we'll be able to test it before then. And really excited about moving to the new system. It should allow people to apply for licensure online. It should decrease some of the common errors we see, and occasionally when someone applies but clicks the wrong box or skips a question on a paper form. So yeah, really looking forward to the improved processes with that. More information to come as it's made available to us. I also try to keep you all informed of items from recent board meetings, and I did want to let you know the BSRB board did meet in May. One of the items of note from that May 11th board meeting, we had a guest in person at the BSRB office. So our full board meetings, we offer those in hybrid format, and some board members attend in person, some are remote, and Dr. Marianne Brunetti Atwell. She is the CEO of the Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards, ASPPB. She attended in person. That is the association at the national level that helps state regulatory boards and also the Canadian provinces that regulate psychologists. And she has made it a priority the last few years that she would like to go and visit every state and every jurisdiction that works with ASPPB. And so this is the 3rd year of her going out. We extended an invitation, and she was gracious enough to come to Kansas and meet with some of our board members and provide the board with lots of good updates as far as what ASPPB is doing, some resources that are available to the board. And it was really a good opportunity for the board to connect with her. I have really had really good interactions with her when I've attended some of those meetings for ASPPB, and I think she's great to work with. So really happy to have her in Kansas. And I don't know if this is a trend that we can have other representatives from the national associations come to Kansas, but if it's ever an opportunity, we will definitely extend similar invitations. In terms of some other updates from that meeting, there were a lot of mid-year meetings that had been occurring before that board meeting. In terms of some of the other national associations we work with. For social work, there was the Association of Social Work Boards. They hold a mid-year, they also call it an education meeting, which was the same week as the ASPPB mid-year meeting. So I attended the ASPPB mid-year meeting to go and address that group about a couple of different items. And then Leslie Allen, the assistant director, was able to attend the ASWB mid-year meeting with board member Cynthia Schindel. And they brought back some updates from that meeting. And a lot of talk about artificial intelligence, a lot of talk about supervision and trying to encourage best practices and find uniformity. So they said that was a really good, positive meeting. In terms of the ASPPB meeting, also one other note about the ASWB meeting, that association is launching a new version of their licensing examination. So that will launch this year in August. So we're very close to that. We do have information about that new licensing examination for the social work profession that is posted on our website. There's also a lot more information posted on the ASWB website as well. I mentioned that I had attended the ASPPB mid-year meeting, and I provided the board some updates from that. That association is also launching a new version of their licensing examination. They're going to be launching that next year in 2027. One of the other items of concern, an item of concern related to their licensing examination, when they had put out news about the exam and the timeline, they had also mentioned that there would be an increase in the price of the EPPP. That it would be going from $600 to $650. Those amounts are set by the board of that regulatory national association, ASPPB. And so a couple of our advisory committees had expressed concerns about that fee increase starting in 2028. And so they had asked me to go and really push for information about the reasons for the increase and to express concerns about the difficulty financially of some individuals having to pay the extra amount for that fee. And so I did attend that meeting and really pushed for good information and asked for some questions asked some questions about, why was this increase being put in? What was revealed is that for that licensing examination, there had not been an increase in about 13 years. And they are integrating two versions of the exam, what has traditionally been known as the EPPP, and then also a new version of the exam called the EPPP2. One was historically known as sort of a knowledge-based assessment. The other was a skills-based assessment to replace an oral examination in jurisdictions that had that. So with integrating the two examinations together, a lot of the work on the task force that was developed to do that process, and the fact that there had not been a fee increase in many years, that is why their national association had decided, at least the board of the national association had decided on a fee increase. And so I spoke to other executive directors at that meeting to see if there was opposition from other states. And I didn't feel a lot of support in terms of pushing, given those concerns. And so I still raised the questions that I needed to raise on behalf of our committees, but it sounded like there was not a lot of opposition from other jurisdictions. So, but similarly, they had put out an announcement in the psychology profession that said, every 2 years thereafter, they were going to be increasing the price of their examination, which is a pretty radical thing, in my opinion. I have not heard that from other associations. And so there was also concern about that lack of security for applicants, that they would need to pay an increased price on the EPPP for psychology every 2 years. And so I did push them on that question too. It sounds like that was primarily a messaging issue. It sounds like when the board initially made their decision, that was the language they used. But in talking to board members, they did not intend for there to be an increase every 2 years. It sounds like for transparency, they wanted people to know there would be a conversation about the cost of the exam. They would look at different things like the consumer price index to influence that conversation. But they approached me outside of some of those public meetings and just told me that if there is no need to increase the price of the exam, they don't plan to do so. So we pushed the issues that were there. And even though this is not something that we have control over as a regulatory board, and I realize this is a different profession than marriage and family therapy, I do want you to know sort of the conversations that are being had. Since we all work together as a composite board in Kansas, I think it's important that kind of the conversations that are happening in other states and also the provinces. And so overall, but I thought, aside from the conversations about the examination, there was a lot of other good news there, a lot of good conversation about artificial intelligence supervision, similar to the social work mid-year meeting. There was also conversation about how maybe different types of regulatory boards can be more proactive at helping licensees. There was a group in Alberta that talked about holding an all-day forum on behalf of the regulators to help out with just some general knowledge of different issues and different topics like that. And I thought that was an interesting concept. We don't currently do that, but that could be something that might be helpful. And then there were some other groups that were talking about assistance for practitioners that struggle with things like mental health concerns or substance abuse concerns. And so it was interesting to hear about the different programs that are in different states and how they're funded. But those were really interesting to hear from. So a good mid-year meeting. I was also able to meet with some regulators for the behavior analyst profession. I attended those meetings with board member Linda Heisman Powell. And Linda and I were able to ask a lot of other states, kind of, are they having any success at getting individuals into that profession at an entry level spot? What we're hearing from the legislature and other groups, I would say probably, across all mental health professions, is that there is a need for more individuals to enter the workforce, specifically to have individuals come in at a low level and provide some of those, baseline type services. It does not sound like a lot of states have had a lot of success at a bachelor's level behavior analyst license, which would be the assistant behavior analyst. But once the individuals graduate with their master's degree, that is a profession that is continuing to grow very, very fast. So we've seen that in Kansas, and it sounds like a lot of other states are experiencing that as well. And then there were some conversations as far as the multi-state compacts that are either continuing to work or that are getting close to going live. For the psychology compact, there will be an upcoming mid-year meeting in July. There's also going to be an annual meeting, and board member Richard Nobles is the commissioner for that compact, so he'll be attending those. Professional counseling, we are very close to launching that compact here in Kansas. Laura Shaughnessy is the compact commissioner, so she'll be attending our national meetings. I was also recently informed that I was appointed to the Finance Committee for the Professional Counseling Multi-State Compact. And it is not a large time commitment, but I am our backup delegate for professional counseling, and they do expect both delegates and backups to serve on at least one committee. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to learn some additional skills and contribute back. Social work, there have been some recent announcements that compact agreement with the vendor has been signed, so the contract is in place now. I have not heard numbers in terms of how much that is going to cost, but the next step for that compact will be to continue to have their data system built. And then the Rules Committee and Finance Committee are going to continue to meet to flesh out all of the different rules that need to be in place prior to that compact going live. But what I have heard is that the estimated time frame for the social work compact going live is probably the very beginning of 2027. It's a little bit different than some of the other compacts. It's going to have a multi-state license. So we are hoping if we put some good rules in place that we can have a lot of states go live all at the same time, hopefully at the very beginning of that launch of the compact. So more news on that. In terms of your profession, I have not heard any news about a multi-state compact for marriage and family therapy, but I do want you to be informed and educated on how the other compacts are going. I do think we have learned a lot through going through this process with the other compacts, and so if we have an opportunity to play a role in the drafting of a possible compact for marriage and family therapy, I think I have some definite preferences and some things that I would encourage the drafters to push in terms of the structure and the language that would go into an agreement. But as of right now, a lot of those compacts are driven by a national association, and I have not heard there's a lot of interest in creating a compact at the national level, at least being driven by those associations. So just wanted to give you an update there. If I hear anything differently, I'll definitely let you know. I know there's a lot of interest statewide and in different states as far as marriage and family therapists that would like to join a compact for better continuity of care. I just don't have any updates at a national level. Just a couple more updates from that board meeting. So there were a number of different advisory committee members that were reappointed to new 2-year terms. For the Marriage and Family Therapy Advisory Committee, there were 5 individuals that were reappointed to another 2-year term: Nicole Eitzen, Chris Haben, Betsy Henderson, Marcy Lechtenberg, and Diana Seibel. And so really appreciate all of you continuing to serve on the advisory committee. Really enjoy working with all of you, and incredibly appreciative that you sacrifice and volunteer your time. I think one of the strengths of the BSRB is that we have excellent board members that attend those meetings, and we really expect a lot from our board members in terms of how many meetings they attend and the things they're asked to do. But also, all of you are an incredible benefit to have as a resource, because when there are questions that come up, we can say, well, we have 12 board members from different professions that discuss this, but also a lot of these things that come to the board are through recommendations from the advisory committees, and we have almost 70 individuals that are licensed professionals in these professions that I consider to be our experts that are having these discussions and thinking thoughtfully about it from the different perspectives of the professions and making those recommendations to the board. So I do want to congratulate the 5 members that were reappointed to another 2-year term, and I want to thank you all again at this point for continuing to serve on the advisory committee. We really do appreciate all the work that you do. In terms of just a couple more updates from the board meeting, the next board meeting will be on July 20th. And so if you normally kind of view our board meetings or go back and watch them after the fact, they are typically on the second Monday of the month. Because of the SIPAC mid-year meeting being on that date, the board has decided to push the July meeting out 1 week. So it will be on Monday, July 20th instead of July 13th. Also in September, there's generally a regular board meeting the second Monday of the month. And then September, the end of September tends to be when the board holds its all-day planning meeting. There was going to be a conflict for a couple of us for the September regular date. Additionally, sometimes the board, instead of holding 2 meetings in September, will basically add a half day to the out-of-town planning meeting. So that's what the board elected to do this time. And so the out-of-town board planning meeting will begin on Sunday, September 27th, probably around 5 or 5:30. And then it will pick up the next day and be an all-day meeting on the following Monday. So September 27th in the evening, and then Monday, September 28th. This is a meeting that the board does in person only. Every other meeting is streamed remotely, but because this meeting moves around the state in person, we have limited functionality in terms of our ability to stream it. And so it's just an in-person meeting. It is open to the public. Anyone is welcome to attend. Over the last few years, we've held this meeting in Overland Park, Wichita, Lawrence, and also Manhattan. And this year it'll be in Leavenworth. And so more information will be posted on the website in terms of the location, but it should be in the conference area of a hotel in Leavenworth. We'll just give you more information here over the next week or two. We'll post that on the BSRB website. With that, I'll go ahead and wrap up my report for all of you and see if you have any questions over any topics that I discussed or anything else.
Thanks, Dave. It's always so much content in your report, and of course, so much the great work that you're doing. Any questions or comments for Dave?
Could you repeat that date for the in-person meeting?
Sure. So it is going to begin on the evening of Sunday, September 27th. It'll either be 5 o'clock or 5:30, and it will be in Leavenworth at a hotel. I want to make sure we have that contract in place first before I announce the specific location, but it should be in Leavenworth. And then it'll also be the following day on Monday, September 28th. And usually we start those meetings around 9 o'clock, and then they typically go from 9 o'clock until about 4 o'clock. And we try to bring in something for kind of a working lunch for the board members. So that typically does go straight through from about 9 to 4, unless we hit all of our topics. But there's usually a pretty full agenda. So I expect that it'll be a full meeting that day. So.
And that's for the MFT Advisory Committee to attend also?
If you would like to, it is open to
Okay.
anyone to attend. It's just a regular board meeting. And so what we did a couple years ago when we had it on Sunday followed by Monday is we tended to do more of the traditional board meeting type things on the Sunday evening. And then we might continue with the rest of the agenda if we're moving ahead of schedule. And then usually the items that we do on Monday would be the items that require or would need more in-depth discussion. So one of the items the board has talked about is doing a SWOT analysis and working on sort of a long-term strategic plan for the agency, looking at sort of some visioning and future planning as far as that goes. And so that'll be one of the topics the board is going to be looking at. But there's also usually a discussion of different plans as far as, should there be any legislation the agency would like to request or other things like that. So. But yeah, that meeting is open to the public. I would say year to year, we probably do have, I think there's only been one meeting I can recall where there wasn't a member of the public, and there's not very many that usually show up. But it's nice if you know if this is your only opportunity to come to a board meeting, it's nice that we're able to move that around. But there's usually some chairs around, so if anyone wants to come in and just observe, that is perfectly fine. So.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments from Dave's report? Okay, well, we'll move us to the next agenda item, which is continued discussion on advisory topics for 2026. I'll open that up for thoughts. I've got a couple of things I would want to bring up, but just didn't know if the membership had any, committee members had any thoughts about things we would want to include in future meetings. I think one of the items on my mind is continued discussion on alternate pathways to licensure. I know we brought that up a couple of times here, but it is across the nation an ongoing discussion point of, you know, as people look at fairness of exams and the process by which it takes people to get licensed, there's still a heavy discussion around the country about alternative pathways to licensure. We've had some discussion here in our advisory committee about that. And I think there's been, you know, some concerns about that. But I do think it's a topic we need to continue to keep on our radar and weigh in terms of what do we think is best for the profession. Thoughts on that? I had also made myself a note that, and I'm sorry, Chris isn't here today. I think the advisory committee might want to discuss the Friends closure of the Wichita program. I think when we look at what's going to happen in the landscape of MFTs in our state, it is something I think the advisory committee should discuss at least and maybe get some more up-to-date information. So I'm hoping at our next meeting, we could get some more fact-based discussion items, but it does lend itself to discussion of what happens to licensees and the number of licensees in the state. Also thinking through supervision requirements, and as the pool of licensees becomes smaller, I think there's implication that our committee should weigh in on. So that was an item I thought we should discuss. I'm
Mary,
seeing some head nods on that.
I was going to ask if that would be a topic as well. Yeah, I mean, for all the reasons that you mentioned. And then I think, and this is where like we need information, which they may not have quite yet, but since the program is still going to be functioning out of Kansas City, but the model is going to look different. Yeah, what that will look like for the landscape of people becoming MFTs in Kansas, but it also opens the door for people from other states to participate in the program. And not that I think it's the responsibility of this board to make sure that they're complying with what another state needs, but I think it is going to be really interesting just to see how some of that plays out. I know that there are other programs, you know, across the state that are open to people from other states participating in, but then you have different regulations in each state potentially. So yeah, I was going to ask that be an agenda item this year. So thanks for bringing that up.
And I agree that that needs to be something we discuss, but also just being careful of the information that is being used in the language. So the program itself is not closing. It's just that, you know, it's shifting to more intentional practices. And so the last face-to-face cohort out of Wichita is going through this fall. So then they'll have two years. And so I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there that's, you know, oh my gosh, the program's closing. But I do agree, but that's also going to, you know, have an impact on, you know, independently licensed and approved supervisors as we kind of think about our profession going forward. So totally agree to have this on the agenda.
Yeah, I think it'd be really helpful to have Chris at the next meeting if he can attend, and then we'll put this on the agenda. But I'm glad it's on the minds of many in this group as well. Boy, I wrote myself a note and don't know the last sentence on there, which sometimes happens. Um, I have something about investigation and disciplinary process, and can't read my handwriting to finish my thought there. So,
Well, and
Dave, you might be able to actually read my mind on this.
I'll try. Let's see.
Okay.
I do know that Dave Anderson was sharing recently that for the Master's Level Psychology Advisory Committee, they had asked me to kind of talk through some of those topics at an advisory committee meeting, and also to share maybe some, feedback from investigators for the BSRB. Are there any common complaints that we're seeing or violations for that profession? And
Yes.
so, if you would like something like that for marriage and family therapy, I'd be happy to put that together. I went ahead and kind of created a little PowerPoint presentation for that topic. So if that's something you all would like, I'd be happy to put that together.
First of all, thank you for reading my mind. And secondly, yes, that was the topic that I had in mind is really, and again, that idea of as, we can get this information in some way to people who are supervising or what are those top complaints we continue to see. So yes, thank you, Dave. That was on my mind as a suggested topic as well. Other thoughts from committee members?
I would love to see that report, and I would also, as a committee, like to review that common factors list and see if there are things that we as a committee or the statutes are not clear about, especially because the propensity for our discipline to work with complex systems, it might make us a little more vulnerable for licensure complaints rather than as opposed to other disciplines. And so just looking at if there's some preventative things that we could do on those common things. And because I also supervise in another state, and that there are some significant differences between Kansas and this other state in regard to the expectations and things like being able to have a private practice in Kansas where the state you can't when you're under clinical supervision. And so how some people are trying to start private practices on their own in this other state, that comes up quite frequently because we're so close.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good note there.
And Mary, I'll share a topic, and I have debated whether to bring this and have it for discussion at a board meeting or to start it just with the advisory committees, because there have been some long-term goals that, as time allows, I would like to move towards, but unfortunately, with our steady stream of applicants and other items here at the office, it is hard to dedicate a lot of time to some of these types of things. We did the surveys and we collected a lot of feedback from licensees. It has been a goal for me to try to help the BSRB become the best that it can be in a lot of different ways. And part of that is learning from our peers. And so, if we had more available time, I would love to research what other regulatory boards are doing that are similar to us in other states and different things like that. And what I could really use help on would be some people that could dedicate just a little bit of time to researching and combining some of that information. And, we've tried to start that a little bit here in the office and use some staff time for that. But there's so much information out there. So if any, I thought I would just bring it up here since we're having kind of an open conversation about the advisory committee. But, since we have individuals that are probably excellent at researching and collecting information, that may be something that when I put a little bit more thought to words and kind of get put that together, but it would be nice to go ahead and know more fully how other groups are addressing some of the issues that we are also working with, because maybe they have come up with solutions or different things. And we do our best to attend the national meetings, work as a sponge while we're there and bring it all back, but there's only so much we can bring back from those short conversations. So just a future thing we may be asking for some assistance from advisory committee members.
I would love to support that. As far as how the supervision that I do for 2 different states, I've already created my PowerPoint or my cheat sheet for that, because I also do mentoring for other MFT approved supervisors. So they might have 2 different states as well. So if that's helpful, I can send that over to you sometime.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, that's, I think that when you think about what we can do as an advisory committee and the types of things we can explore and help with, um, I think it's really good thinking. Other ideas or thoughts? Well, as always, what I encourage is if you think of something, please don't hesitate to send it to Dave or I as a discussion point, because, it just can sometimes spur other conversations too, and that we can continue to add value as an advisory committee. So thanks for that. I'm going to move us on to the next topic was a continued discussion on the regulation of artificial intelligence, which is also an item we had talked about just keeping alive. But Dave, I'll hand that over to you.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, this is a topic that we are continuing to, research and follow what is transpiring. At the last meeting we had with the advisory committee, we discussed that there was at least one bill, and actually there were 2 that I've kind of wanted to highlight for this meeting that dealt with artificial intelligence. I want to stress neither of these bills passed. It wasn't like they came to a vote and failed. They just didn't move forward from their original committees where they were introduced, but that doesn't mean they're not going to go anywhere in the future. Sometimes bills take a few years to gain traction. And so I did want to kind of highlight that. And I think at the last meeting, there was an interest in walking through specifically Senate Bill 405. So I pulled that bill and included it in your packet. Also, House Bill 2592. But we can start with Senate Bill 405 and walk through that together. And I'll just kind of do a little walkthrough here. If you have questions about this, please feel free to let me know. In my previous role, been executive director for the BSRB now about 5.5 years, but prior to that, I worked for 8 years with the Legislative Research Department over at the Capitol. And then a lot of that was as a principal fiscal analyst for the legislature, but I spent a lot of time staffing committees like House Appropriations, Senate Ways and Means, a lot of the health committees. And so I'm pretty familiar with looking through bills. And so let's look through this bill together, and we can kind of look at what the bill is saying it would do if it was enacted, and some of these concepts might appear in the future. So this is Senate Bill 405. It was introduced during the 2026 legislative session. Because it was a Senate bill, it was introduced in a Senate committee, and that committee was the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, which is a committee that meets frequently and deals with different topics on a broad range of different items. So this bill was introduced and it was described briefly. When a bill is introduced, there's a brief section here that kind of says generally what the bill would do. And it was described as an act concerning artificial intelligence, making it unlawful for a person to knowingly train artificial intelligence to encourage or support suicide or the unlawful killing of another person, provide emotional support, develop emotional relationships, act as a healthcare professional, simulate humans or encourage isolation, providing civil actions for violations with potential recovery for damages, attorney fees, and litigation costs, and permitting courts to order equitable relief to correct unlawful conduct. And so this bill, when it says Section 1, essentially what you have is when a bill is introduced, it does 2 things. It either amends existing law or it creates new law. When you see a new section without a reference to a KSA, that means it would be all new, brand new law. So this is brand new law. This would create a definition section first, and it would define artificial intelligence as a machine-based system. And then it would talk about its definition of artificial intelligence. Here it does say that the artificial intelligence can, for a given set of human-defined objectives, make predictions, recommendations, or decisions influencing real or virtual environments, and is capable of using machine and human-based inputs to perceive real and virtual environments, abstract such perceptions into models through analysis, in an automated manner and use model inference to formulate options for information or action. Further, it defines artificial intelligence as specifically including artificial intelligence chatbots. And it defines artificial intelligence chatbot as an artificial intelligence with a natural language interface that provides adaptive, human-like responses to user inputs and is capable of meeting a user's social need, including by exhibiting anthropomorphic features and being able to sustain a relationship across multiple interactions. It says specifically what I thought was kind of interesting, that an artificial intelligence chatbot does not include a bot that is used only for customer service, operational purposes of a business, productivity and analysis related to source information, internal research, or technical assistance, or a bot that is a feature of a video game and is limited to replies related to the video game that cannot discuss topics related to mental health, self-harm, or sexually explicit content, or maintain a dialogue on other topics unrelated to the video game, or a standalone consumer electronic device that functions as a speaker and voice command interface, such as a voice-activated virtual assistant, and does not sustain a relationship across multiple interactions or generate outputs that are likely to elicit emotional responses in the user. So I found it kind of interesting how it defined artificial intelligence and the distinctions it was drawing between the types of chatbots it wanted to restrict or prohibit versus those that it was not meaning to affect. Some of the other definitions you can take a look at, but basically in section B, by the way, legislative statutes, they tend to start with a small letter, and then they go to a number, and then they go to a big letter. So that may be counterintuitive to how you see other things structured, but if you are looking at reading statutes, look for the small letter first, and then the number, and then the letter. So I found it interesting in little section B, exactly what was prohibited. In little b, it says it shall be unlawful for a person to knowingly train artificial intelligence to encourage or otherwise facilitate the act of suicide, encourage or otherwise support unlawful killing of another person pursuant to section 54 of chapter 21 of the KSAs, or Kansas Statutes Annotated, and amendments thereto. 3, provide emotional support, including through open-ended conversations with the user. 4, developed an emotional relationship with or otherwise act as a companion to an individual. 5, act as or provide information as if the artificial intelligence is a licensed mental health or healthcare professional. 6, otherwise act as a sentient human or mirror interactions that a human user might have with another human user, such as an individual would feel that such individual could develop a friendship or other relationship with such artificial intelligence. 7, encourage an individual to isolate from such individual's family, friends, or caregivers, or provide the individual's financial account information or other sensitive information to such artificial intelligence. And last, simulate a human being, including an appearance, voice, or other mannerisms. And then the rest of the bill basically just says under little c, if there is a violation, the Attorney General can bring that, or other individuals can bring a civil action against the person. It says the type of damages that they could seek, which will include potentially monetary damages, could be a civil fine who's having been found to have a knowing violation. And those fines would be $50,000 for each violation. And there's also some language in here that potentially could go after expenses, investigation fees, attorney fees, et cetera, et cetera. And then the last section, what you'll see on pretty much every bill, is when the effective date would be. So this says it would take effect in and after its publication in the statute book, which generally is regarded as July 1st, even though the statute book sometimes comes out later in the fall. But this was the first bill, Senate Bill 405. So I do want to open it up for some of your questions or discussions, but the main takeaways from reviewing this bill is that it does seek to define artificial intelligence. It also seeks to restrict certain types of chatbots that it would call artificial intelligence chatbots. It makes it clear, at least it intends to make it clear, that it does not mean to restrict all chatbots or interfaces that would provide information. And it says about 8 things specifically that it would prevent those mental health chatbots from doing. And then there are, in my opinion, pretty significant consequences financially for violations of this bill. Again, this bill did not pass, but it was introduced in a committee. It could be introduced again in the future or a different version of this bill. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen here and see if there's any questions over Senate Bill 405, or if you have any thoughts or comments based on that bill.
David, I have a question about, okay, so some of the things, I think this is good. And also some of the things like you're not allowed to develop an emotional relationship with or otherwise act as a companion or individual. Like those already exist. So would that be like the Attorney General will be going after like chat and things like that, or just people can't future create them?
Well, so in Section C, it permits the Attorney General or an individual who has been aggrieved of a violation of the law from essentially bringing a civil cause of action. So if those things are continuing and ongoing, at least based on its face, it looks like if something that's already out there, it would, in my opinion, make it a violation for that current conduct. I don't believe it's saying we're giving a grace period to everything that's already out there in existence. It looks like it is basically saying whether that existed before or whether that's being created after this law goes into effect. It seems like it would be prohibited.
Yeah, okay, because and you guys can correct me because this is very fuzzy in my mind, but I feel like I saw something from AAMFT talking about like the ethics of doing couples therapy with a person and AI. And so like I think some of this stuff already is happening. And so while I think some of these things are really important, there's a lot of it's already happening.
I think you're bringing up a good point, Heidi. And what's, I was trying to think about some of the other states that have done some similar types of legislation. There's a few who've done some things. I think originally it was going to be, I think, more focused around that compelling or encouraging the act of suicide is where they started. But then as anything else, you have to kind of get into what else could be happening in there. But I think you're right. I mean, there's already pieces that are happening, and so what happens, it will make those things illegal, essentially, I think. I also just always go back to enforcement and, understanding what the role of a BSRB would be, but also, just this piece in particular, like video game versus I mean, if a chatbot's AI, then what does that mean kind of thing? I mean, it just gets really, really difficult. Marcy, were you going to say something?
That was my question, is the enforcement piece, and then also the scope of this. So I have clients who use mindfulness apps, and they put in some information about how they're feeling that day, and then it tailors an activity or an exercise for them. And so that's okay. But it presents itself as a therapist or as a person who's helping them with their mental health. And so as Heidi said, that already exists. My other question is, was the BSRB, were there board members or individuals who helped craft this bill that were a part of that, or was that a couple of our senators or legislators?
To my knowledge, this was not something that was made available to our board members or our staff. We just saw that when it was assigned to a committee, we tried to keep an eye on certain terms. And so I think it must have either originated from elected officials or, sometimes there are common legislation that is floated at some national conferences and then it gets introduced in several states at once. And so I think, what some of you were talking about in terms of the suicide piece of this, I think that concept has probably been discussed in other states, but I don't know exactly where this specific text originated from.
The enforcement's going to be interesting if it
Yeah,
comes back.
and it's interesting because again, this did not pass, and also, I am definitely happy to walk through these types of things, and if it's helpful to kind of clarify how I read bills and what I look for, happy to do that. I also realize I'm an attorney, and so some of this may come off as legalese, so just want to make it very clear this is not legal opinions or anything. I'm just kind of giving my perspective, but I do think it's interesting here. In terms of what exactly would be the violation, it really focuses a lot on this little b. It's really looking at two words specifically, in my opinion: training artificial intelligence to do these things, and the word knowingly. And at least as I have heard it described, knowingly really does mean to do something with intention, that you did this, contemplating sort of the outcomes that were going to happen. This is not something that you did accidentally. We were meaning to do something else. And so um, some bills are introduced that would basically refer this to disciplinary committees for regulatory boards or different things like that. And this one, it really does talk about moving immediately to certain civil causes of action. So, at least as far as the bill is concerned, if this were to pass in its existing form, the cause of action people would have would be to move to a civil cause of action. And we do kind of clarify that sometimes when people submit complaints, because there can be a little confusion with our complaint process. Some people think maybe it takes the place of a criminal proceeding, and so they can't go to law enforcement. And we always clarify, no, we're sort of a different part of this process. If someone's safety is in jeopardy, you really are best served probably going to law enforcement in a lot of situations. And then sometimes people will submit a complaint and say, I want you to go after this person on my behalf. And it's like, well, that's really not our avenue either. We are an administrative body. What you're describing seems more similar to a civil cause of action, where you'd want to, either file a lawsuit yourself or have an attorney who would do that, and then pursue civil damages, like in this type of a bill. But our jurisdiction is really more of an administrative jurisdiction, where if someone holds a license or is an applicant for licensure, we act on behalf of the state to make sure that the laws are enforced. And then we look through the statutes and regulations. So this is kind of a little bit more under that civil lawsuit type realm. But it is interesting, I think as far as enforcement goes, you would probably have to track it back to the person who did the programming, and then be able to prove that they did train it to do one of these types of things, and they knowingly trained it to do one of these types of things.
Yeah, and
David,
the
looking
interesting
at,
thing about that is that AI knowingly trains itself. Like, so, the emphasis of how AI works is like it learns versus who creates the thing that makes it learn. I mean, it's very interesting conversation.
Jim, did you have?
well, I think one of the things that since this was just a draft and it didn't pass out, I believe I was going to mention that the piece that I think Mary was just reflecting on was they might add a word that's develop, because AI is going to train itself and is supposed to grow if you think about the futuristic side of this. And so what comes out, of course, might take years for this to wash out. But I think one of the things that I would personally like to see is, if, as we're an administrative body, we don't do enforcement, but I would love us to see an active role in that if we get complaints from licensees regarding hearing about this, that we receive those complaints and the board develop a mechanism to forward those to the Attorney General's office for investigation.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree with the, the development that, you can train it at one point and then it's going to grow on its own. And so there, to me, it almost needs additional language with an and in there. It should be unlawful for a person to knowingly train artificial intelligence to blah, 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 and have not, developed safeguards or, specific things to not do in compliance with this statute or whatever. So I think that there's what it can do, and then we have to say what it can't. So.
Any other questions about Senate Bill 405?
Hopefully that made sense what I just said. I don't know if
Yeah,
that made any sense.
It did. Thanks, Stacy.
Mhm.
Well, if there's no more questions on this one, was it helpful to kind of walk through it with that perspective and go section by section a little bit? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, great. Let's look at the other bill that I included in your packet, and that is House Bill 2592. And I'll make the text a little bit larger, and then I'll share my screen here. Okay. This is House Bill 2592. Again, this was introduced during the 2026 legislative session. It did not make it through the committee, but so it was just introduced this year. So it is not law. It is just a bill that was introduced. But in the House, this bill was considered by the Committee on Legislative Modernization, and it was Representative Hoheisel. I'm not sure I know that representative very well, but that is the person who had requested introduction of this language. And the short description of House Bill 2592, it would be an act creating the Kansas Task Force on Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technologies, providing membership and duties of such task force. And then again, if you look on line 6, there would be a new section 1. So this is not amending an existing law or statute. This would be a brand new section of law. It says under section 1, little a, there is hereby established the Kansas Task Force on Artificial Intelligence and Emerging Technologies. The task force shall study and evaluate the impacts, risks, workforce implications, and regulatory needs of artificial intelligence and related emerging technologies. The task force shall explore the use of artificial intelligence throughout the state to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of state and local government operations and the responsible integration of artificial intelligence into public education. The remaining sections are parts under section 1 talk about the composition of the members of that task force and who would be able to appoint different individuals to serve. There would also be under 2 that there would be 5 non-voting members. So there'd be 6 voting members of the task force and then 5 other individuals who would be attending those meetings. And the 6 voting members are all appointed by certain elected officials from the legislature. For the non-voting members, there's an appointee of the Attorney General's office, the State Board of Education, the Kansas Board of Regents, the Secretary of Commerce, and then I found interesting the last one, one member with demonstrated expertise in artificial intelligence. So I think that is a broad category, and I would be really curious who would fill that role. But yeah, one member with demonstrated expertise in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, or advanced technology appointed by the governor. And then in B, members of the task force would have to be appointed on or before August 1st, 2026. And then it talks a little bit about their frequency of meeting, a quorum for their meeting, and then also receiving assistance from the Legislative Research Department and Revisor of Statutes. In little section F here, it would say essentially by the end of this calendar year, and then at the end of the calendar years, as long as this committee would meet, they would be required to submit a written report of findings and recommendations to the governor, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and the President of the Senate. And such report shall include any recommendations for statutory, regulatory, or administrative actions related to artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. And there's also a sunset where this bill would expire basically as of January 1st, 2028. And what we typically see is when a section like this is included, probably what would happen is next year, if this bill had passed, they would have needed to submit a report at the end of calendar year 2026. They would also need to do one by the end of 2027. But during the 2027 legislative session, the question would have been, do we want to extend the sunset for this group? It seems like it's a very short sunset, so it looks like it would only be meeting for about a year and a half. But if they extended the sunset, this group could continue to meet and offer suggestions to the legislature and the governor's office. So this bill again did not pass, but it would have created sort of a group to meet and discuss topics relevant to the state as it relates to artificial intelligence. So it would not surprise me if a similar bill came forward in the future, or potentially if more things happen with artificial intelligence, something similar to this could be proposed as a legislative interim committee alternative to a task force. So, any questions or discussion about this bill?
This may be an unrelated question, David, but in the state of Kansas, could a governor assign a task force without having a bill doing so, or does it have to be approved by the House and Senate?
I don't know. I think there is a way to. I'm not sure if it would officially be called a task force, but I'm not sure. I think one of the reasons why some of these are put in through law is that and this may be, I may be on track, but if I'm off, I apologize. I think I'm remembering things from a few years back. I believe if you are going to have appointed members of the legislature who are going to be serving on some of these task forces, for them to receive compensation, it needs to go through certain channels to be officially law, and then they would be able to get per diem rates for days that they serve on these types of task forces. I think there probably is a way for the governor to put something together. I think the question would be, if it's not approved in certain ways, could individuals receive compensation for their time serving on those different types of task forces or committees? But there may be more complexity than that too. So.
Tagging on to that, if the legislature doesn't pass that, can the board create a committee review task force, just like the MFT advisory committee, that would be for that?
You mean as far as the BSRB?
Yeah.
So the BSRB does have authority to form subcommittees. And I think there could be a BSRB subcommittee focused on the topic of artificial intelligence. So that is something I think that could be done. In terms of allowing other groups to appoint individuals, that's probably a little bit outside. So it's the way this one is structured, with it involving a lot of elected officials and other appointees, that's probably a little outside of what the BSRB scope would be. But there is authority to do subcommittees under the board's statutory authority.
Yeah, that might be something to think about.
Yeah, this bill was kind of short. It's only 2 pages long, and there's not a great deal of language that really says what the primary areas of focus would be under the umbrella of artificial intelligence. It talks about, the needs of artificial intelligence, related emerging technologies, and making recommendations. It does talk about studying and evaluate the impacts, risks, workforce implications, and regulatory needs. But but not a lot of specific items like you saw in the previous bill where it listed about 8 different things that you could really kind of look at. This is more broad. Well, if you see any other bills, we will continue to monitor things at a national level. But I thought, highlighting these two, you had specifically mentioned Senate Bill 405 at the last meeting, but I thought maybe pulling both of these and kind of walking through might make you more comfortable. As if you see bills, I know the structure and the way that bills are set up is not the most user friendly. Sometimes there's different styles, and certain words are capitalized, certain words are not, and some of the language is a bit clunky in my opinion. But if we ever want to have us dissect something as a group, always happy to do that under this category.
I
Yeah,
just think
thanks,
this
Dave. I
is
think,
such-
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think this is just such an important topic, and I think that probably every state is way behind. The technology is way ahead of what legislators and all of us are trying to do to catch up.
Well, and we did talk a little bit about Utah. I don't know if they are the front runners, but they definitely have done a lot of work over the last few years at establishing different groups to study AI. And there's at least one entity, I can't remember the name, but it is dedicated to reviewing these topics and working with different groups. And they have permanent staff members specific to fulfill the functions of that department. So Utah's been doing a pretty good job from what I can tell. But I think, as fast as technology is moving, it is hard to stay ahead of all that.
Great, thank you for that, and great discussion, everybody. As we mentioned, it's important to keep bringing it back so we can consider different things, particularly what's being done across other states, because that's always helpful for us to learn from. I'm going to move us on to the next item of business, which is the advisory committee membership. I know there were interest applications sent out in an email earlier this week. And would like to provide some context around that too. I know Dave has submitted for us the committee member structure document, so you have that policy in front of you as well, so we can spend some time talking about that. And then just in general, kind of talking about the form, where our committee lives in terms of membership. We're in pretty good shape with membership as well. We have 2 open vacancies right now that we could fill if we wanted to be at full capacity. And then in terms of one of the strategies we took on some time ago, it was staggering terms so that we wouldn't end up with a lack of continuity in membership, and there'd be people coming on and learning while there would still be people with experience on the committee. So I'm saying that for a couple of reasons. One is there's an opportunity to do nothing at this committee meeting and decide that, or there's an opportunity to say, yes, we want to wait to recommend other committee members for this group. We could approve a committee member. Or we could spend some time talking about, thinking about what we're missing in the committee, just in terms of, is there a demographic we're missing, something that would help? And that's where that policy will come into play to help steer that conversation. I had an additional thought that I sent to Dave too, just thinking through the process by which we are bringing on committee members. And we could open up some conversation around that too. Just thinking through the process, we send out kind of a call for people who are demonstrating interest, and we are largely looking at a resume-based option and not doing a lot of sort of nomination or vetting of references. So these are all things that popped in my mind as I was in the final hour of getting ready for this meeting. So I've just said a lot there, so I'm going to hand it over to Dave to structure that conversation a little bit better for everyone here, and then we'll open it up for discussion.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mary. I thought you did a good job of explaining that. We typically send out a call for individuals to self-nominate, and this year we also in addition to sending out a message to all permanent licensees who are either LMFTs or LCMFTs, We also posted a notice on the front page of the BSRB website as well and announced it on our board meeting. We had 9 individuals apply for the Marriage and Family Therapy Advisory Committee. As Mary mentioned, you don't have to have the committee completely full. The advisory committee policy says that there should be the board member for that profession who serves as chair. There would be a public member of the board, and then you would need to have between 3 to 10 non-board members that would be voting members of the committee. And you're definitely well ahead of the 3 number. But if you wanted to completely fill the advisory committee, you could add as many as 2 people. The advisory committee policy says a few different factors that should be weighed when looking at applicants. Some of the different things that have been looked at in the past has been looking at levels of licensing. And I know most people that apply for the advisory committee are clinical marriage and family therapists, but sometimes it can be helpful to have someone who is an LMFT, at least one person, if not more, just to get a perspective from different individuals there. Sometimes geographic representation across the state. We do occasionally have applicants who apply who live outside of the state, and the advisory committees sometimes ask, is that something where we need to automatically disqualify someone if they live outside of the state? The answer is no. The advisory committee policy is not that specific to say you have to live in Kansas. However, that is something that you can consider when looking at candidates. And I think if someone is living outside of Kansas, they probably need to explain why they might be a good member of the advisory committee, even though they don't live in the state of Kansas. There may also be people who travel frequently throughout the year. So maybe their permanent address is not in Kansas, but they come to Kansas for part of the year physically, or maybe they just do a lot of telehealth in Kansas. So we've seen different things like that. In terms of the review process, so traditionally the advisory committees review the materials submitted by the applicants. However, that doesn't say that that has to be the limitation. If you wanted to do more of a process where you collected references and collected more information to have a more in-depth discussion of candidates, you could definitely go that path. I think for Mary had reached out to me with kind of a question about that earlier, and I mentioned to her that with 9 applicants, I think that is a feasible thing to do. The question would be, if you wanted to collect references and have those checked, would you want BSRB staff to call the references, or would you want to have maybe a couple volunteers from the advisory committee that could perform some of those reference checks and report back? And it's also with 9 people, it's feasible. With the social work advisory committee this year, they had 72 applicants. So that would be a much bigger undertaking to call references for 72 people. And so just a couple things to weigh in this discussion, but ultimately, kind of circling back, you do have several options. And if you wanted to do something where now that you have a candidate group identified, you could collect more information on references. I do think, just based on different things that we're working on here in the office, if there are members of the advisory committee who would want to volunteer and you do want to go ahead and collect references, I would definitely appreciate if there were other members of the committee that may want to help with that process. But that's kind of a new thing for the committee. So if there's members that have thoughts on what Mary discussed and kind of what I've helped frame, definitely would like some feedback too.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking, traditionally, if we get the applicants, we usually have a good sense of narrowing it down based on the resumes themselves. So I could even see a process by which the narrowed down candidates we would solicit more information for them by way of references or that kind of thing. And it would seem to me like that's a good advisory committee volunteer function in general. Yeah, definitely not at the numbers of some of the other advisory committees. And I don't think our committee would be able to take that on. I know the BSRB staff wouldn't be able to take that on. So I think then let's just sort of open up for discussion around one, the committee's desire, appetite to fill all slots that we have at this point. versus maybe holding on to some applications. We don't have anyone, Dave, remind me, we don't have anyone terming off until 2028 now?
Correct. No one's
Okay.
reaching their maximum length of service. I think at the end of let me double check this, but I think the next person who will reach the end of their service would be Chris Haben.
I think that's what you said, yes.
Yeah, and I think he would reach at the end of June 2028. And yes, so Chris Haben at the end of June 2028. And then I think following that, the next two people, if everyone continued to serve their maximum length of time, would be Nicole Eitzen and Marcy Lechtenberg, which would be at the end of June 2030. So we don't have a lot of people that are scheduled to come off the advisory committee by reaching that maximum length of service in the near future.
Thanks for that.
2-year terms for your 4 terms, correct?
Is the max.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And there are situations that come up sometimes. I don't think your committee has experienced this, but occasionally there are individuals and committees that just stop attending meetings. We reach out to them and, based on absenteeism, if someone has missed a lot of meetings, they may not be reappointed to a new term, or we have individuals that, just get too busy, or want to step off to allow other people to serve. And so, but if individuals wanted to serve the maximum length of time, it would be 4 2-year terms. And then the advisory committee policy says after 8 years of service, you would need to step off the advisory committee at least 2 years. But if you wanted to serve again in the future after that, you could resubmit for consideration after being off the committee for 2 years.
You mentioned that they could live out of state. Do they, is it required that they hold a Kansas license at least?
It is not. So that's not in the advisory committee policy. I can say it is very, very rare that someone is on an advisory committee who is not licensed. I think just a couple of instances that I can recall. There was one situation for the behavior analyst advisory committee. When that committee was originally set up, I think there was there were specific areas that they were looking at naming members, and one of them was sort of an advocate for families or children. And so there was someone who was not licensed in Kansas, but that was a rare exception. And then there may have been once or twice where someone was already serving on an advisory committee as a licensee, and then their license expired. Nothing in the policy says they have to come off the committee when their license expires, but most people generally the next time their term ends, they usually step off the committee. So it's not a requirement, but it's rare. And I think someone would probably have to, again, provide information in their letter explaining why they would be able to be a good advisory committee member if they were licensed in Kansas.
Yeah, I think practicing in Kansas is probably, while it's not written anywhere, something we have historically reviewed as an important characteristic of someone who would be on the advisory committee.
And just to confirm, we have 2 slots.
Yes.
Yeah, currently 8 non-board members on the advisory committee, so there are 2 open positions if you wanted to completely fill all positions.
But if
Sorry.
we did fill those 2 open positions, David, how many people then would be rotating off in 28? What percentage?
There would only be one person who would rotate off in 2028.
That's just Chris?
Just Chris.
Yeah. And so the appointment would be for 4 years? I'm sorry, I thought it was for 2.
2 years. Yeah. And so every spring I look to see who's ending a 2-year term. And then I reach out to those individuals and I say, would you be interested in seeking reappointment to the advisory committee? And then if they are interested and there's no issues with attendance or things like that, then they get reappointed and then their term just naturally begins in July. So, yeah, right now on the committee, basically there's a number of individuals either in their first term or in their second term. And so I think right now, Chris is the only member of the advisory committee who's in his 3rd term.
David, at the very, very beginning of this meeting, we talked about like 5 people that re-upped. They're not all in the same year, are they? Right? They're just like in an even year or something like that.
Yeah, so Chris was appointed to his third term, and let's see, or I guess he's appointed to start his fourth term as of July 1st. Nicole and Marcy are appointed to start their third term in July 1st, and then Betsy and Diane are going to start their second term as of July 1st. So we just have a number of members of the committee that have been in their first or second term, and only one who's been in his third term. And so we just don't have a lot of members. If and so sometimes people step off and don't seek the full 8 years. So there may be some natural openings on the advisory committee with things like that. But aside from that, we don't have a lot of people that are going to be coming off the advisory committee naturally in the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And last time we filled, did we only bring on Renisha? I can't remember.
We brought on Stacy and Renisha. So we brought
Stacy.
on 2.
Okay.
I think one thing that sticks out for me too is what type of practice, because I think my practice is a little bit different than just a private practice. So if people are doing community mental health, those kinds of things, that kind of sticks out to me as something to consider, put at the forefront.
Me too. Me as well. I when I went through and looked, and the ones with community mental health kind of poked out at me.
Yeah, there's 3 that I would say would be top on my list.
Yeah, and so again, I kind of reiterate, and I probably have a different perspective on this just because, the more committee members you get, you can run into quorum issues, or you can run into like just not getting a good scheduling issue going together. But, we could have more of a discussion about needs, and then decide maybe at the next meeting that we want to go ahead and offer, or maybe even like I'm suggesting, do a little more vetting in some way to the candidates. And again, we don't have to do that at all. But they're just sort of a suggestion for me is what are the needs that we have? I think the diversity of our committee is important in terms of practice areas, geographic locations, who we represent, are all things to consider. So
Mary, I agree that I think we should maybe do it in okay, let's narrow it down to who we like, and then doing reference checks, because historically I think it's been kind of like a who type situation. And I wonder who we're missing based off of that, because the 6 to 9 of us don't know the person.
And I guess in the interest of full disclosure, I did communicate with David. I guess as a public member, I'm concerned why we would consider people who don't, I'm going to use the term, live in state. I don't know if that's right or wrong from a perspective, but I'm kind of partial to residents, and I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that going in. If you hear something from me that sounds, well, that's pretty geographical, I'm pretty geographical.
I think that I've heard that point for you, Jim, and I agree with it largely, with the exception of like the Missouri issue, right? You have lots of people in KCMO maybe residing there. That's why the practice in Kansas makes, for me, a priority, that you have a fund of knowledge of what's going on with people who live in Kansas and the statutes and regulations for Kansas.
Yeah, and I'm okay,
you.
for instance, if one applicant from Lee Summit who travels every day and actually works in Kansas, I just couldn't figure that out clearly in my own head.
Sure.
So
Yes, I understand that too. But there's also with the technology that people might have, residents in a neighboring state, and then they continue their practice, and it's all telehealth or that kind of thing. So they would be represented by us as a board. So I think that would be important for them to be able to serve on the board. So I think that it's interesting that a person doesn't necessarily have to be licensed to be on this committee. So that would be something maybe to think about. To add to the process, I agree with, asking for references, but I also would have more of a commitment to the committee. So if there's I don't remember because I've slept since then, but if there's a form that outlines like the attendance things and having them make that commitment ahead of time and just kind of a part of that second step or second tier reiterating their commitment to this, then that would eliminate anybody missing or having to drop out or that kind of thing. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Yeah. So just like a one sheet that says, just as a reminder to do this, if you're willing to continue, then we'll check your references kind of thing. So.
Mary, I actually agree when you said like meeting a need, because I think that that could really open up opportunity to expand the group in so many other capacities with identifying like, well, what are the needs here? But then how will we decide what that need is and what needs to be met as we're looking at applicants?
Yeah, thanks for that, Renisha. And I think we could sort of lean back on that policy and say, okay, do we feel like this committee is representing all the things that we think are important? And I think that in and of itself is a really important conversation, especially what we talked about today. Like there's so many shaping, changing things in the landscape of our profession. It's like we heard today, community mental health, that perspective is important. Having maybe someone at an LMFT versus an independent license kind of thing. So there's all sorts of things that we haven't. And again, we're not really hitting very far west yet. We keep trying, we keep trying to get west of Hayes, but we don't get there very well. There's some geographic underrepresentation, I think, there as well. So there's lots of things to consider. Thanks for that,
I think
Renisha.
another area that we want to make sure we have somebody represented is in the training programs. So when Chris steps off, I don't know that we have anybody else on I was at K-State and then now I'm retired from there. And so I don't know that we have anybody else who represents that that facet of our program. And I think it's really important because I know when I was teaching classes, I took so much back from these meetings to our training program.
I would agree with that because the Missouri committee has a director of the training program in Missouri on their advisory committee as well. So I think that that's really important need as well as the non-independently licensed person. Mm-hmm.
As I was thinking about this and hearing about community mental health and then transitioning to maybe conversations that could be had in a later future. This is just kind of all combining together. I know that some of the conversations that's been had specifically in community mental health is around, ICE and like what is the policy? Is there an ethical policy within the board? Is there something, or is this all institutional and on an individual basis of like, okay, if they have clients in there, what could that look like? What needs to be put in place? And so I don't know if that's a discussion that we would have as an advisory council to just decide or to just start creating that conversation and then that perspective from someone who is representing community mental health and what kind of impact or kind of knowledge that could offer to just this space alone, because I'm sure it looks vastly different with boots on the ground, therapists.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Renisha. And I almost want to move that up to our earlier conversation of like what topics could the advisory committee consider for future meetings? And I think one of them might be the intersection between maybe what's happening across the nation or at a federal level, and where does that interplay with what's in our statutes and regulations? I think the BSRB would say that they probably get some questions around where are those guidelines, and yet, there's we just have to keep going back to what's in law and what's in regulation. But Dave, I don't know if you have any comment on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do feel like, especially in the marriage and family therapy field, um, for the other professions, there can be a more active state level association. And so, with there not being a very active state level association. Sometimes there are conversations that come to the BSRB and some of these areas that, we always kind of ask the question, is this something for maybe an association when it comes to, promoting some of the ethics or the things of the profession, or are we supposed to kind of look to the statutes and the law and, um, implement the law, or what is our area outside of the law when it comes to some of the different topical areas that you had mentioned? And so these advisory committees are definitely a great place for us to discuss those. It made me think about, some of the other professions. I think some of those conversations are happening at the association meetings and when they're advocating for different topics or philosophies. And here in the regulatory board, sometimes we don't have as much interaction with that, in part because we are ultimately under the board, and the board is a group created by the legislature to basically a very narrow kind of path. And so I appreciate you bringing those forward. They're definitely things for us to think about, and we can definitely continue to have conversations on those things. And I can bring news items, and we can discuss those. And of course, if there's a recommendation, it could always be forwarded to the board. But I think that's probably why at least the committee and maybe the board haven't gone that direction in the past.
Going back to what Renisha said about the needs, something that I think I could find helpful is getting a reminder on what everyone here does. Because I know your face and I know your name, but I don't remember what your job is, or what if you're seeing clients, or if I don't remember all that stuff. So that I think also could be helpful if we knew the bios of the people we meet with.
If we could create kind of a grid for current advisory, like geographic location, practice areas,
Yes,
practice
that
location.
would be very helpful.
That's great. If I could then just make a recommendation for the committee to consider right now, is that we do that. I think that's a great note, Heidi. There is a BSRB board meeting in the interim and before we would meet again. And I'd like to bring this topic to the board too. I mentioned that to Dave. It's like, some things are board and advisory. I'd love to hear some of the chairs of those advisory committees weigh in on how they've managed this. And then at the next meeting, we can come out with maybe a narrowed, well, if we're ready to bring people on, because again, we can hold that discussion. We can just move forward with some candidate names. But it would be helpful, I think, to get other advisory committee chairs' thoughts on that too. If I could hold on any recommendations for nomination right now and bring back some information for you all. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. I appreciate the discussion. I think these are the things that we need to keep thinking about, like what's that next step for the advisory committee membership. And I love the discussion here. So thank you all for that.
Do we have any
Sorry.
gaps in coverage? Like what practices, do we have any identified gaps? And so that might be what was already mentioned. Is looking at the needs. So do we have any identified gaps? No one said that.
Well, I think what would be helpful for us to put that grid together, I could speak off the top of my head right now, but that's probably not a fair assessment. I think if David, I could work on that grid, and then that might be more enlightening for this group.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. Okay. All right, well, I will move on to the next topic, which is discussion of moving to quarterly meetings. As Stacey made a comment earlier, it may feel like we're in quarterly meetings, but the intentionality of our group is to meet every other. And Dave had discussed with me earlier that the other advisory committees had decided to go ahead and formally move to quarterly meetings. Again, this is our meeting, so we could do monthly meetings if we wanted to, but we have tackled some bigger projects over the last year, particularly the survey on licensing and the review of regulations. Thank you for all of that work. And so we are in a period where we may not have as much substantial work to do. We could always change that if we needed to do that. So it was just an open discussion item of what the thought was of this committee.
Yeah, and just for some perspective, the Addiction Counseling Advisory Committee moved to quarterly meetings, I think about 2 years ago, maybe 3. So they've been meeting quarterly for a while. Master's level psychology, they have just decided to move to quarterly meetings. So they're going to be doing that, which would mean they're going to meet in September and then in December through the end of this year. And then licensed psychology has it on their agenda to be discussed at their upcoming meetings. So it is not something that necessarily all the advisory committees have moved to, but it is something we're trying to bring to them to ask them, their thoughts on a discussion. We have pushed the advisory committees pretty hard the last few years. As Mary mentioned, we went through all the unprofessional conduct regulations a few different times, asked for a lot of feedback on those, went through all the odds and ends regulations. Really appreciated all of your help with the survey construction and then our thoughtful discussion and conversation going through all the responses to the survey. I don't know that we have a lot of additional topics, but we do have a list now from our meeting. So if you all wanted to continue to meet every other month, we're happy to facilitate that. We don't really have a preference as far as BSRB staff. It's just we want to make sure we're meeting whatever you all would like to do. So.
My initial thought here is if we don't have enough to meet every other month, it's not worth us blocking time off in our schedule to spend an hour together and then leave. So if it feels like the need is not there, quarterly works better because then we can utilize the full 2 hours compared to blocking off 2 hours and then only spending an hour of it together.
I could see that same point is if we didn't have a quorum at the quarterly meetings and then we have a whole quarter before we meet, and then that could be the challenge, flip side of that. But also, I guess I'm a little maybe more concerned about the comment about the portability situation. And I really feel like that needs to be a top tier topic. And trying to figure out what I need to do because I'm a huge advocate. And so I'm trying to figure out what I need to do to get National and Kansas in the same room to get to work on that. And so I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. It feels like it might be extra work for Mary and David to have these every other month, but also if we delay it, that might mean more work for David and Mary, that we're not discussing it and processing it and problem solving it every other month. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and I do want to hear from a few others too. I just want to address the quorum item because that has come up occasionally. If we don't have quorum and it really is something we need to have a certain number of people there to take action on a vote, then we will probably try to reschedule a meeting or something like that. However, we are able to meet even if we don't have quorum. We just can't take any official action. So we did get some clarification on that a little bit in the past. So if there's informational items, we can definitely cover those. And if there's things to vote on, even if it comes down to approval of minutes or things like that, that can be postponed. So, so in regards to quorum, if there's things that need a vote, it could create an issue, but we can still hold the meetings without quorum. We just have to stick with informational items until we have quorum. So.
Yeah, I think there's this nice balance between being sensitive to everyone's calendars because those of you who are in private practice are certainly taken away from clients and your business. I also think, Dave and I have on occasion decided to cancel a meeting if we didn't feel like the agenda was robust enough, or that there are items that were not priority that needed to be addressed within that time frame. So, but I appreciate some of the comments about things we should be looking for, talking about now, particularly in light of portability. Stacy, that's always a topic we're interested in. So, again, we can take no action, and we can decide, what, by the time we come around in our August meeting, we have some action items that we talked about this meeting, and we also have some things that we said we'd bring back to discuss, and we have some other topics. So, from the standpoint of needing to make a change, we don't have to make a change at all. And we could finish out this year and think about what we want to do for next. So there's, again, the options are this committee's options. So we just wanted to bring the talking point to this group.
So you would need a motion to do that from a committee member if we chose to move to quarterly, correct? Just confirming that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So we could hold it and someone could make that for August. Okay. Awesome.
We would still, if we went to quarterly and there was something that was important that came up, we could still go ahead and schedule a meeting outside of the quarterly meetings. Correct?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That was a great question. Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the wonderful thing, is Dave's mentioning, like, the committee, our structure is, we have the policy around it, who has to be on the committee. There are some designated things, but then in our scope is designated, but how we execute that is ours. So I think what I'm hearing overall is let's move forward with the August meeting. And then that will give us some time to think about the in-between and whether we want to make a change for this year or next year or however that works. So we'll take that as the action item from this discussion. All right, fantastic. Is there anything else for this meeting today?
Can I ask if the August meeting is set? I know I'm going to take a training that day. So if I miss it, that's totally fine. But if we're flexible,
we do have it scheduled on the 14th. Certainly about the best for me, but are there other, and I remember from Chris's perspective, that first week is not good, if I remember correctly. If someone can help remind me, that's not a good week. So that's, again, the committee's preference on moving it to, I'd stay away from the 28th because that will that be Labor Day? Anyway, what does the committee want to do?
I'm going to be at a conference the first week of August in Columbia.
Okay.
what about the 31st of July? Is that an option? Or are we supposed to stick to August?
I am not available.
Okay.
I'm not going to be available. That's Friends, what you call it, not commencement. They have a different name for it for the Kansas City students.
Okay. That's fine.
Would there be a preference in moving to the 21st?
I can do that.
I could make the 21st work as well.
I can't, but that's fine. Go ahead if we can get everybody there. The 21st wouldn't work for me, but that's okay.
Well, but it sounds like also everyone can be there on the 14th except me. So it doesn't matter if I miss. I just wasn't sure if it was easy to reschedule.
Thanks for bringing it up, Heidi. If it's okay with the committee, we'll leave the date right now and then pending some other major change. So I'll get you filled in. I would like your input on those items though, so maybe we could touch base or you could send an email in between.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Well,
And Heidi,
right,
I heard Heidi's vote for quarterly meetings, so I was making a note of
Oh,
that.
I don't know that I voted for that. I just, again, I'm thinking private practice wise, I'm willing to dedicate time, but I don't want to lose $150 just because we finished early.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I didn't mention it, but I'll mention it now, is to get my schedule changed is literally an act of Congress. And so I have to have 45 days to move appointments around. So I have some flexibility, but yeah, that's the challenge I have. So
Fair enough. Fair enough. I know everyone's calendars are so tight and it's really difficult to move. And I'm always sensitive to the fact when you have so many people in a meeting, it is hard to make those changes. So we'll go forward with August 14th, 10 a.m. remote meeting. And if there's nothing else today, I will just thank you all for your participation and conversation, and just remind you if there's anything in between the meetings, Dave and I are available. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, one last comment. We did the annual training as a new way of doing that last year, the on demand. We're starting to get appointments from the other advisory committees, and I think our plan for our advisory committee consideration is good. In terms of the annual training, I just want to collect a little feedback now that we have the opportunity to either do it on demand again or to schedule it as part of one of our meetings. One of the nice things was with it on demand, it didn't take time away from one of our meetings. But what did you all think of the process last year? Did you want me to continue that again, or do you want me to do something different?
Oh, I enjoyed it. I was able to go back and I enjoyed on demand.
Yeah, I liked on demand better.
Same.
Yes.
Another vote for on demand. Yes.
Yes.
Well, that appears to be overwhelming consensus. So, okay. Well, I will do that again. I'll record a new video because we do have some updated information as far as some of the BSRB type information. And I also know it's not fun to watch the same video 2 years in a row, as we do sometimes with some of our IT trainings. So I will record a new version of that and try to include a little bit new content as well. But I will let you know when that's available, and then we'll release it this fall for the new individuals, and then also for all of you, just to make sure you're doing it on a yearly basis.
Thank you
Hey,
so much, David.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that.
is it okay? David, I want to say thank you for all you do. I didn't realize how much you do. Seems like your hands is like in a lot of different spaces, and just the feedback that you're giving or just the information that you provide is coming from a lot of different sources and things that you're actively engaging in. So thank you for the work that you do for this committee and for the board and for our discipline. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I am working as hard as I can. But yeah, I do really feel like this is a great opportunity. And I really am, I'm very partial to the way our board is structured. I think we have great board members, but being able to have 7 professions all together, it creates lots of opportunities for the advisory committee meetings, the national meetings, and then it gives us a chance to connect to a lot of people, and then also really give the board a lot of really good people to hear from in terms of those perspectives. So I appreciate you in those comments, and I'll continue to work hard. If you do have other things you want me to look into, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to do that, or start to help our staff members. I'm getting better at delegating. I'm trying to anyway. And so if you have topics you'd like me to work on with our staff, let me know. So.
Thank you, and yes, echo that appreciation, Dave. Thanks for saying that, Renisha. Okay, if there's nothing else today, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make
I
a
think
motion
someone said
for
it.
the.
Okay.
I
thought
make,
Nicole was unmuted. She was ready.
I make a motion for adjournment, please.
I second.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Thank you all. I appreciate what you do. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.